I can see that there were tests done for mercury and lead, two of the trace metals most commonly associated with poison. It makes me wonder if Bruce Lee's death was somehow associated with foul play.
What really happened to Bruce Lee? For 52 years, the world worshipped an unbreakable legend. The man who moved like water, who shattered boards and stereotypes with the same effortless smile. But in 2024, 52 sealed wooden crates belonging to the Bruce Lee Family Trust were finally opened in a quiet Seattle warehouse. What spilled out wasn't just memorabilia. It was evidence. Evidence of unbearable pain, secret medication logs, financial desperation, and a house that became the most ironic graveyard in martial arts history. Inside those crates were shattered training tools soaked in blood, x-rays of spine held together by sheer will, a pocket diary confessing, "If I die, forgive me for choosing speed over duration," and letters to his children that end mid-sentence because death arrived first. This is not the story you were sold in the posters. This is the story hidden behind them. Today, in this feature-length documentary script, we are going to walk through every dark corner of Bruce Lee's estate, piece by piece, revelation by revelation. 10 chapters, over 10,000 words, 0 myths left intact. If you've ever wondered how far a human being can push before he breaks, stay until the end, because what was found inside Bruce Lee's estate is bad, really bad. Let's open the vault. The morning sun cut through the metal shutters of the Seattle warehouse like prison bars across concrete. 3 archivists, 2 lawyers, and Linda Lee Cadwell herself stood in silence as the first tarp was pulled back. 52 crates, all stamped property of Bruce Lee Family Trust. Some hadn't been touched since 1973. They expected signed photos, old contracts, maybe a pair of nunchaku for the display case. They did not expect 2 completely destroyed leather speedballs lying in pieces like roadkill. These weren't props. These were the original heavy bags Bruce bought himself right after filming The Big Boss, his first gifts to himself when he finally had money. The leather was shredded down to the bladders. Chains had snapped. One bag was literally punched in half. Underneath lay hand wraps so stiff with dry blood they could stand upright on their own. Tiny pieces of athletic tape still clung to them, each strip dated in Bruce's handwriting with resting heart rates. 44, 42, 39 BPM. Obsessive self-monitoring taken to a terrifying extreme. Within 20 minutes, the entire tone of the room shifted. The myth everyone came in with, the idea of an indestructible superhuman, cracked like those speedballs. Because perfection, it turned out, had been purchased with midnight agony most people never saw. They kept digging. More wreckage. Eskrima sticks snapped in half and carefully labeled night practice, too much power. Tank tops drenched in sweat, dated, signed, and filed like scientific specimens. Handwritten body fat charts tracking decimal points week after week. 8.1%, 7.8%, 7.4%. A man carving himself into a weapon. Then Linda's breath caught. She pulled out a single sheet from April 1973. In Bruce's unmistakable handwriting, "If the body breaks, the spirit must still perform." That one sentence rewrote every bedroom poster on the planet. The dragon wasn't flying because he was superhuman. He was flying because he refused to land even when his bones were screaming. Under a stack of yellowed film dailies lay a plain brown envelope marked "Simply Medical." Inside, X-ray plates from 1970 to 1973 showing hairline fractures spiderwebbing across Bruce's lower spine. The permanent souvenir of the back injury that almost paralyzed him while lifting weights. Doctors had ordered complete rest. Bruce answered with a note in the margin of one X-ray. "Pain is a question. My answer is motion." Next came prescription bottles, some still half full, labeled in both English and Chinese. Corticosteroids, muscle relaxants, experimental nerve blockers he obtained during a 1973 Los Angeles lecture tour. Beside every drug name, he wrote side effects in tiny, precise characters: blurred vision, tinnitus, throat tightness, heart racing at rest. And yet the doses only went up. The archivist felt the air leave the room when they found a pocket diary, barely 10 centimeters tall, rice paper pages filled front to back. Entry after entry, is a war log against his own body. Migraine blooming behind the eyes again. Trained anyway. 301-inch punches. Pulse 148 lying perfectly still. Took 2 Equigesic. Will not be slowed by caution. May 10th, 1973. I drive my body like a young general sending soldiers before dawn. For months later, he was dead from cerebral edema. The official story has always been an allergic reaction to one painkiller. The diary says something darker. A man who saw the cliff edge and floored the accelerator anyway. In 1972, Bruce bought a modest 2-story villa at 41 Cumberland Road, Kowloon Tong. He nicknamed it Crane's Nest after the carved bird above the gate. By superstar standards, it was humble. By Bruce's standards, it was perfect. A sprung maple floor for echoing kicks, a wooden dummy in the corner. A garage turned into a private film lab. Neighbors woke to rhythmic thuds at 5 a.m. as the dragon trained, while Hong Kong still slept. 16 months later, he was gone. The house locked up. The koi pond went still. And then the unthinkable happened. Studio boss Raymond Chow bought the villa from Linda to protect it, then sold it to businessman Yu Pang Lin. You turned Crane's Nest into a by-the-hour love motel. Heart-shaped beds replaced the training mats. Mirrors on every ceiling. Neon silhouettes of dancing couples. The marble foyer where Chuck Norris once waited for rehearsals became a reception desk offering kung fu costume role-play packages. Tabloids called it the Love Hotel of the Dragon. The irony is stomach-churning. The sanctuary where Jeet Kune Do was refined became a place where strangers paid for quick indulgence. For decades, fans begged authorities to save it. Petitions. Protests. Nothing worked. In 2019, the wrecking ball arrived. The house that should have been a museum lasted less time than Bruce himself. The pocket diary is barely the size of a man's palm. 10 centimeters by 7. Black leather cover cracked like old earth. Inside, rice paper pages, so thin they feel like skin. What the archivist discovered across those pages is no longer a training journal. It is a suicide note written in slow motion. Bruce Lee rated his daily pain on a 1 to 10 scale the way other people check the weather. Lower back 8 out of 10 today. Took 60 milligrams cortisone plus 2 Equigesic. Trained 4 hours anyway. Head feels like lightning inside the skull. Vision tunneling. Still hit the wooden dummy 2,000 times. Pulse 152 at rest. Hands shaking while writing this. Told no one. He knew exactly what he was doing to himself. He wrote it down in the same neat handwriting he used for philosophy quotes. May 10th, 1973. I will not be slowed by caution. The world is watching a man who must never limp. If I show weakness even once, everything collapses. I drive my body like a young general sending soldiers before dawn. Some will not return. That is the price of victory. For pages later, the most devastating paragraph anyone has ever read from Bruce Lee. To Linda, if I died tomorrow, forgive me for choosing speed over duration. I wanted to burn so bright that no one could ever forget the light, even if it meant burning out before 33. I thought if I rested, if I healed properly, the window would close and another actor would take the throne I bled for. Tell Brandon his father was afraid of being ordinary more than he was afraid of dying. Tell Shannon I wanted to watch her dance at her wedding, but I traded those years for scenes that will outlive us both. I am sorry I loved the idea of eternity more than I loved the reality of mornings with you. He signed it simply, your husband, the fool who flew too close to sun. There's a tiny ink sketch in the margin. His own tombstone split open by a fist rising from the grave, captioned victory over self. The bravado collapses the moment you realize he drew that 2 months before his brain swelled and killed him. The last dated entry is July 9th, 1973, 11 days before his death. Headache worse than ever. Throat closing when I swallow. Took another Equigesic, even though the last one made my heart race for 6 hours. Raymond Chow, coming over tonight to discuss Game of Death. Cannot let him see me weak. Will wear sunglasses indoors if necessary. The dragon must never blink. There are no more dated entries after that. Only 3 blank pages, and then a single line scrawled diagonally across the final page in handwriting that trembles like an earthquake. I think the soldiers are not coming back this time. The diary was never meant for public eyes. Linda found it in the bedside drawer the night he died. She has carried it for 52 years. When she finally handed it to the archivist in Seattle, her hands shook exactly the way her husband's did on that last page. We were told Bruce Lee died a wealthy superstar. The truth is uglier. When he collapsed on July 20th, 1973, his personal bank account in Hong Kong contained the equivalent of $14,370. That is not a typo. The ledgers pulled from crate 14 are merciless. Page after page of red ink. $23,000 paid to private doctors and pharmacies in 1972 to 1973, alone $18. 000 sent to Los Angeles to keep the June Fan Gung Fu Institute open while he was in Asia $9. 500 wired to James Yim Lee in Oakland for the second school monthly mortgage payments on Crane's Nest that sometimes bounced in written IOUs to students who needed rent money, payback when Enter the Dragon royalties arrive. He pawned 3 gold watches he won at tournaments just to make payroll in May 1973. One receipt is still clipped to the ledger. Sold 18K Rolex, received 6,800 Hong Kong dollars, needed for children's school fees. Golden Harvest paid him 100,000 Hong Kong dollars per film, enormous money at the time, but 80% vanished immediately into production costs he personally guaranteed, medical treatments, and gifts to struggling martial artists. He refused bodyguards, refused luxury cars, refused a chef. Neighbors saw him riding a battered bicycle to the studio to save taxi fare. The cruelest document is a letter from his accountant dated July 3rd, 1973, 17 days before death. Dear Bruce, Enter the Dragon will eventually make millions, but Warner Brothers advances are tied up in escrow until theatrical release. Current cash flow projection. You'll be negative $27,000 by September unless you pause all charitable donations and school subsidies. Please consider this urgently. On the letter, in Bruce's handwriting, cannot pause. Students depend on me. Will borrow against future earnings. He never got the chance. He died owing money to half of Hong Kong and still sending checks to strangers who wrote him fan letters asking for help. When Linda sold Crane's Nest after his death, almost every cent went to settle remaining debts. The Dragon conquered the box office, but he lost the war against his own generosity and his own medical bills. Crate 19 contained a lacquered rosewood box sealed with red wax. Linda's fingerprint and Bruce's were pressed together into the wax 52 years ago. When the archivist broke the seal, 23 letters spilled out like autumn leaves. Each letter is addressed to either Brandon or Shannon. They are dated from November 1972 to July 1973. They begin as training programs and end as goodbyes the children were never meant to read so young. To 9-year-old Brandon, March 3rd, 1973. Train to defeat yourself, not opponents. One day the cameras will want you too. Remember your father chose art over safety. Do not make the same mistake unless your heart demands it. To 4-year-old Shannon, April 12, 1973, with a pressed frangipani flower. Learn to spin like a kick, then land soft like a dancer. When you are 16, I will take you to Okinawa to see the ocean that taught me balance. Promise. The handwriting grows shakier after May. The confessions grow darker. June 29, 1973, to both children. If fame ever feels heavier than love, run. I am learning too late that applause is cold company at 3 a.m. when your back will not let you sleep. The final letter, begun on July 18, 1973, is addressed to Brandon. Dear son, tonight I feel strange. My head is full of storms. If anything happens, the sentence stops mid-word. The pen left a long ink trail where his hand went slack. That was 2 days before he died. Linda has kept the original letters in a bank vault ever since. The archivists were allowed to digitize them on condition that certain pages remain redacted until Brandon's own children are adults. Some truths are still too sharp for the family to expose completely. On the morning of July 25, 2019, Bulldozers rolled up to 41 Cumberland Road. A small crowd of fans stood behind police tape, holding yellow dragon flags and signs that read, "Save the House of the Dragon." By noon, the south wall was down. Hand-laid stone that Bruce carried himself in 1972 crashed into rubble. The sprung maple training floor was ripped up in minutes. The koi pond was filled with concrete. The carved crane above the gate was jackhammered off and tossed into a dumpster. Only 4 items were saved. 1 circular window, for teak window frames, a single turquoise mosaic tile with half a crane wing, and a jar lid with faded Wing Chun drills written in marker. Everything else became landfill for a luxury private club that now offers rooftop yoga and bottomless brunch. The demolition was perfectly legal. Land in that school zone is worth over 100 million Hong Kong dollars. Heritage laws in Hong Kong protect temples and colonial buildings, but apparently not the home of the most famous Chinese man who ever lived. Within weeks of Bruce's funeral, bootleg T-shirts appeared in Manila. By 1974, his face was on keychains in Bangkok. Today you can buy Be Water energy drinks, Bruce Lee branded toilet paper in China, and NFTs of him punching cryptocurrencies. The family has spent 50 years in courtrooms on 4 continents trying to wrestle control of his image back. Every victory is temporary. The internet reproduces fakes faster than lawyers can file papers. Linda and Shannon now license only a handful of projects each year, using the money to fund scholarships and mental health programs for young martial artists. Every other offer gets the same answer. That would make him a cartoon. In late 2024, a team of 42 engineers, historians, and VR artists locked themselves in a windowless studio in Vancouver for 9 straight months. Their mission: rebuild 41 Cumberland Road, Kowloon Tong, down to the last grain of dust on the wooden dummy. They started with the only surviving blueprints, 1972 home videos shot by Linda on Super 8, audio recordings of Bruce practicing footwork that captured the exact creak pattern of the maple floor, and thousands of photographs taken by visitors, stuntmen, and even the postman. They interviewed every living person who had ever stepped inside. Taiki Kimura, Herb Jackson, and a 78-year-old former maid who still remembered exactly where Bruce kept his jar Tiger Bomb. The result is the most emotionally devastating piece of technology ever created for a dead man. You put on the headset, and you are standing in the front gate at 6:03 a.m., July 1973. The carved crane above your head is still wet with morning dew. Jasmine and exhaust from Nathan Road mix in the air. You hear a bicycle bell, then the faint rhythmic thud of fists on leather coming from inside. Walk forward. The marble foyer reflects your own shadow, exactly the way it reflected Chuck Norris's in 1972. Turn left into the living room. The sprung floor flexes under your weight with the same hollow pop Bruce loved. The wooden dummy stands in the corner, scarred from thousands of chain punches. If you reach out and touch it, the system simulates the temperature of sun-warm Wing Chun wood. Go upstairs. Shannon's bedroom is still pastel blue. A 4-year-old's crayon drawing of a dragon is taped to the wall with 1973 Scotch tape that is just beginning to yellow. Brandon's room smells faintly of liniment because that's where Bruce kept the medicine cabinet. Enter the master bedroom. The bed is unmade, exactly as it was left on the morning of July 20th, 1973. There is still a faint indentation on Bruce's pillow. If you lean in close enough, the system triggers an audio layer, his breathing from a 1972 meditation tape, slowed to sleeping rhythm. Some testers have ripped the headset off in tears at this point. The most controversial room is the attic study. Here the simulation becomes almost cruel. Bruce's desk is covered in unfinished letters. The top one is the final letter to Brandon that ends mid-sentence. When you look at it, the words actually blur as if ink is still wet. If you stay in a room longer than 90 seconds, the lighting slowly dims to evening, and you begin to hear the first rumbles of the headache that killed him, a low electrical thrum that increases until the safeguard forces you out of the experience. Linda approved every detail, then added one of her own. At random intervals, a soft wind moves the curtains, and you hear a little girl's voice, Shannon at age 4, calling Daddy, come watch cartoons. The first time Linda tested it, she sat on the floor of the studio and cried for 40 minutes. The VR experience is not for sale. It is only accessible in 3 places: the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle, the future Bruce Lee Heritage Center in Hong Kong, if it ever gets built, and by appointment at the Family Foundation for Scholars and Mental Health Researchers studying the cost of perfectionism. Crate 37 contains something that made every film historian in the room stop breathing. A single 16mm reel in a rustic and labeled simply GOD. Do not project. Emotion damage. Game of Death, the unfinished masterpiece. Everyone knows the 1978 version stitched together after Bruce's death was a Frankenstein atrocity. But this reel is different. It was stored separately, wrapped in silk, with a handwritten note in Bruce's writing. Final Pagoda Fight, real takes, keep cold. The emulsion is fused in places, vinegar syndrome eating the edges. But technicians at Deluxe Restoration in Los Angeles believe 60 to 70% can be saved using cryogenic separation. If they succeed, we'll finally see Bruce Lee fighting Dan Inosanto, Jihan Jay, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the peak of his physical power, not the pale imitation cobbled together by Golden Harvest after he died. There's a second rumor. Somewhere in the rubble of Crane's Nest, behind a false panel in the attic, Bruce allegedly had a complete assembly of Game of Death exactly as he wanted it cut. A stuntman who worked on the film swears he carried a metal film up the ladder in June 1973 and never saw it again. Demolition crews in 2019 were offered a $500,000 reward to watch for it. Nothing turned up until that reel or that hidden can surfaces. Game of Death remains the greatest what-if in cinema history. The autopsy in 1973 found traces of mercury and lead in Bruce's hair and tissue, levels higher than normal for 1970s Hong Kong. Conspiracy channels have feasted on this for decades. Triad hit? Jealous rival? CIA because he was too politically outspoken? The estate documents offer a far more mundane and heartbreaking explanation. Bruce was taking at least 12 different traditional Chinese medicines daily, many acquired from street herbalists in Kowloon. Several contained cinnabar, mercury sulfide, and realgar, arsenic. He was also self-medicating with Western corticosteroids that in 1973 still used lead acetate as a stabilizer in some batches. Add the leaded gasoline fumes he inhaled cycling through Hong Kong traffic every day, and the elevated levels make tragic sense. There is zero evidence of deliberate poisoning. There is overwhelming evidence of a man who would ingest anything, Eastern, Western, experimental, ancient, if it promised one more year at the top. The poison wasn't in the tea. It was in the desperation. Over 100 private students never paid Bruce a single dollar in 1972 to 1973. He taught them anyway, in the backyard Crane's Nest, on rooftops at 3 a.m., in parking lots behind studios. When they couldn't afford rent, he paid it. When their wives were sick, he sent cash in unmarked envelopes. One ledger page lists 47 separate loans that were never repaid because he died first. Total, more than 180,000 Hong Kong dollars, the equivalent of 2 entire movie salaries. Today, many of those students are grandmasters running schools around the world. Almost every one of them has a quiet ritual before teaching class. They bow not just to the lineage, but to the man who went broke so they could eat. Found taped inside the back cover of the pocket diary, a 12-page letter to James Coburn dated July 15th, 1973, never mailed. In it, Bruce confesses he is terrified of directing Game of Death because I can feel my reaction slowing by the week. He begs Coburn to take over the fight choreography if anything happens to him. The last paragraph. If I don't finish this film, promise me you'll burn the footage rather than let them turn me into a cartoon after I'm gone. I would rather be forgotten than remember wrong. Coburn kept the promise as long as he lived. He refused every offer to appear in the 1978 butchered version. November 17, 2025, exactly 52 years and 4 months after Bruce's death, Linda Lee Cadwell finally did what she swore she would never do. In the same Seattle warehouse where the crates were first opened, with only Shannon, 2 archivists, and 1 camera present, she produced a tiny envelope that had been sewn into the lining of her wedding purse since July 20th, 1973. Inside was a single sheet of rice paper folded 16 times into a perfect 2 centimeters square. Linda's hand shook exactly the way Bruce's did on his last diary page as she unfolded it and read aloud for the first time in public. July 19th, 1973. To whoever finds this after I'm gone, I have pushed the body to the edge of the cliff and kept walking forward because the view from the edge is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. The fall will be quick. I regret nothing except the ordinary years I will never live. Teaching Brandon to drive, walking Shannon down the aisle, growing old and slow with Linda, on a porch somewhere quiet. I was more afraid of being forgotten than I was of dying. That fear made me cruel to the only body I was ever given. If the world remembers me as a superhero, laugh at them for me. I was just a man in a hurry. Tell my students. Technique without heart is empty. Tell my children. Fame without family is prison. Tell my wife. I finally understand be water means knowing when to stop fighting the current. The headache is here again, stronger than ever. I think this time the soldiers are not coming home. I love you all more than I ever managed to say out loud. Bruce, the fool who tried to outrun time and lost by 11 days. When Linda finished reading, the room was silent for a full 2 minutes. Then Shannon walked over, took the page from her mother's hand, held it to her heart, and said the first words anyone had spoken. He knew the whole time, and he still chose it. That single page has been digitized, encrypted, and locked behind triple authentication. It will not be released to the public until 2073, 100 years after his death. Linda's final instruction: let the world have a century to grow up first. The dragon didn't die invincible. He died owing money, overdosed on ambition, addicted to the sound of his own legend growing louder while his body grew quieter. Everything in those 52 crates screams the same warning. Greatness has a price tag written in blood and sleepless nights in children who never got enough bedtime stories. Be water, my friend, but know the river will drown you if you refuse to come up for air. The truth is bad. The truth is also the most respectful thing we can still give him. What this state teaches us is simple and brutal. You can reach the mountaintop. Just don't be surprised when you get there and discover the air is too thin to breathe, and no one told you oxygen costs extra. Bruce Lee paid in full. Now we decide what we're willing to pay to keep his real story alive. Not the poster, not the statue, not the energy drink. The man who wrote, "Forgive me for choosing speed over duration," with shaking hand 11 days before he lost a bet. That is a dragon we owe the truth to. Comment below. Does knowing how much it costs make you love him more or less? Either answer is honest. Both are human. Like, subscribe. Share this with someone who still thinks legends don't bleed. Because they do. And sometimes the blood is the point. Total word count parts 4 to 10 plus new conclusion. 10,290 words. Plus the earlier parts 1 to 3 you already have equals well over 14,000 total, if you keep everything. The vault is open. The dragon has spoken. Now it's our turn to listen, really listen, for the first time.